Okay, primary school May, I'm sort of like Dick Van Dyke. I got like a little like waistcoat on. I've got little leather shoes and maybe like tartan trousers and a little mushroom cut. And I'm always kind of trying to tap dance or be like, well, hey, how's everybody doing? Like always trying to sort of put on a show. Extroverted, really geeky. Yeah, really into comedy. And then puberty hits and I get very sullen. I grow my hair out. I start wearing like sort of like polystyrene platform shoes. And there's a couple of excruciating years. And then I've been just since then I've been slowly trying to get back to my child self of Dick Van Dyke.
Well, I mean, Dick Van Dyke is just such a kind of clear image of him in my head. For somebody to go into comedy, I think it requires a certain personality type. And I think all comedians are very different, and that's why there's so many different styles. But I think there is something there that unites people as to why they especially stand up. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways you can. I think for some people it's like being a genuine fan of comedy and wanting to be part of it all. And then for some people, it's like a deep chasm of longing for approval and kind of a weird chip on your shoulder. I think for me, it's a blend of those two things because I really am still just a massive comedy fan. I still go on my nights off. I still go and watch comedy and I love it so much. So I like to think it's for the love of doing it and less about the gaping chasm.
Okay, so tell me about how you got into it. So I want to know kind of, you were how old? What was the first gig like? Were you any good naturally? Did you kind of have to develop a persona?
I started when I was 13. So I did improv comedy classes and then I was doing sketch comedy. And yeah, I mean, I was right in the midst of puberty, acne, braces, greasy hair. Often
Happens
in my
to us all.
Oh man, just I was a real grotesque teen.
Yeah, me
and
too.
Yeah, and just
Yeah, it's fine though.
Everyone goes through it, yeah. And talking about my teachers and stuff. So that's sort of when I started. The first time I went to a comedy club, I was 10 or 11, and my mom took me, and I was wearing my waistcoat, full Victorian child, and I sat in the front, and the headliner got me up on stage because it was very strange that there was a kid in the audience, and he made me be like his ventriloquist dummy, and he was making me say like filthy things, and I was opening my mouth, and afterwards my mom was like, "Oh, that must have been so traumatic. Why did I bring you here?" But I was like, I'm hooked. I got to get back up there.
I got to be someone else's mouthpiece for a sec. But that's so interesting because 13 is so unbelievably young. Reflecting on that period of your life, I mean, to get up on a stage at 13 years old and to have the confidence, you must have been quite mature in some ways.
Oh, I don't think so. I think I thought I was, and I don't think I was mature at all. And I don't know why I thought it was an appropriate thing to be doing or why I was given like a very long leash. But I was so passionate about it and stubborn. And I think really I felt like an outsider at school. I probably felt I was probably super queer and trans. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And then I found this adult community where everybody was being really celebrated for their differences and people were very self-deprecating, and I got a lot of attention early because of how young I was, and that was pretty addictive to have that kind of pedestal. Very addictive. And then the harsh reality when you hit 18 and you're no longer the youngest person.
Yeah. Okay, so you drop out of school at 15 to pursue comedy full time. That's a huge decision. But I guess, like you're saying, I mean, that passion's coming through. Maybe you know that this is the only thing that you want to do. How do your parents take that?
They weren't pumped about it. Yeah, they were not pleased. Yeah. It was a tumultuous time, but I hope since then I've kind of proven that it was a good call. I don't really have a backup plan, so thank God it's working out.
So how do you go from that to drop out? How do you go to making it a career?
Well, I was really lucky. I had sort of, I think probably because of the novelty of my age, I had a lot of success early on, and then that went away, and I moved to England when I was 21, I think, with someone I was dating, and then it's just a grind. You just have to get up and do it. I had, I worked in call centers, and I was a nanny for kids, and and then slowly, because I hadn't had to have a day job in my teens because it was going well, and then suddenly I was in a new country, and but I loved the Edinburgh Fringe, and I met so many people, and I just really immersed myself.
Yeah. I mean, Edinburgh I've only been once, and I'm going to try and go again next year because I think it is the most magical place in the world.
It's crazy.
I've never seen anything like that.
I know. It's Hogwarts, and it's full of comedians, and people are up until 6 a.m. every night, and it's a really electric atmosphere. Yeah. I definitely I learned a lot.
When you moved to London, was that also because, forgive me for my ignorance of the Canadian scene, was that because there was a particularly strong London comedy scene that you wanted to be involved with, or was it just I'm dating this person and so off I go?
No, it was, well, to be honest, it was the latter. It was I'm dating this person and I have family here. My grandma was in London, and my uncle, and hadn't seen them in a long time, so there were a lot of reasons. And then once I got to London, I realized how massive. I mean, there's like 200 comedy clubs in London alone, and I think there's probably about 8 in Toronto, and there's sort of one scene in Toronto, but in London there's all kinds of different pockets of sort of cliques and different styles of comedy. So yeah, it was amazing. Suddenly I could do 2 or 3 shows a night, which I think London and New York are the only places you can do that, and it was great. So I just got deep into it. And there's a theatricality to it, and it was in line with my taste from growing up with a super British dad and loving British comedy. I loved that it wasn't that sort of old school aggressive stand-up all the time. There was a lot of silliness and character comedy and just all kinds. Yeah, there's a kind of alternative comedy scene where that's the case, and then there is a very clubby scene as well where that's less the case, but that's evolving as well. So I mean, when I started in my teens, I mean, in 2001, and oh my god, it was like being in a sort of cliched 80s movie about misogyny. It was like crazy, the atmosphere, and it's so exciting to feel the shift that's happened in that time. And a comedy audience is like a little microcosm of society, and so you can really get a read on general public opinion and stuff, and and things are definitely changing for the better.
When you moved, so you're only 21, and I asked this because I have lots of friends who aren't from the UK and moved here, and they said that something that they experienced when they moved to London was, even though it's incredibly busy, that it can feel quite like a lonely city, and I wondered if that was a similar experience to what you had.
It took me a while to find my social niche. There's a phenomenon that exists in England that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, I think, which is called school friends, which I think it seems to me like people have their regular friends and then they have their school friends, and it's like this impenetrable group. And so, I'm making all these friends, and then like New Year's Eve comes along, I'm like, what's everyone doing? And everyone's like, oh, sorry, it's just literally every year I just hang out with my school friends, and we do it every year. We get an Airbnb and we just do it, and it's like, oh, okay. But how do I
love your English accent so much. I want that all the time, just constantly narrating my life. Yeah. But also I feel very seen in that moment.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
In an uncomfortable way? Or?
Yeah, that's some hard truths that I'm going to have to unpick later.
Literally just me, Phoebe, Annie, Charlie, Tash, Becca. It's so intense. And I'm like, how do I penetrate this group?